Welcome to The Straight Stitch, a podcast about sewing and other fiber arts. This is episode 86, and my name is Janet Szabo. I'll be your guide as we explore all things sewing. We have almost reached the middle of July here in northwest Montana. It's been an interesting summer weather-wise. Usually we hit July 1st and the blast oven goes on, and we get no rain until September. This year, while it's been warm, I wouldn't say it's been oppressively hot, and we've been getting good soaking rains every couple of days or so. The garden is looking great. My husband picked about 4 gallons of raspberries last night, so those are going to either get made into desserts or go into the freezer for use this winter. I have been bound and determined to take the month of July off because May and June were ridiculously busy for me, and I did about half a dozen non-sewing related things. And July is usually the period of time when I have a few weeks between the nuttiness of getting the garden in and the nuttiness of harvesting everything. Right now I'm just waiting for things to grow. So I'm trying to do as much sewing right now as I possibly can. Also, I have friends visiting from Eastern Tennessee. They're here for a couple of weeks, and we've been out doing things and traveling together. My friend Robert and I have known each other for 45 years since we were both in high school, and his girlfriend Dina is a sewist. I said to somebody last week that I was so happy that he had the good sense to have a girlfriend who sews. And last Friday, Dina and I took a quick trip down to Missoula to do some fabric shopping there. I made a few garments to put on display at the quilt store and dropped those off last week and got a bunch of new classes put on the schedule for this fall. So I'm also in the process of making store samples in a variety of projects, some table runners, some garments. Over the weekend, I worked on the Remy raglan from Sew House 7, and I like this pattern a lot, but as is typical for a lot of patterns out there, I'm having to make some modifications for myself. I don't really do well with cropped tops just because I have a very long torso, and cropped tops look kind of weird on me. So I'm having to do a length adjustment, first of all, but then I also have to do a full bust adjustment. And for this particular pattern, I'm trying just lengthening the front, making the bottom curve of the front a little bit longer than the back. Normally, I would probably put bust darts in, but this is a raglan, and it's not impossible to put bust darts in a raglan design, but I'm going to try doing the simple fix first and see how that works out. So I'm using an old linen sheet to make my muslins, and I'll run that up later today and see if my fix works. I know enough about fitting my own body that I can make some of these adjustments right off the bat. Teaching them is a different story. In any case, I plan to be doing a lot of sewing over the next couple of weeks. I also have to get my class proposals in for Sew Expo, so that's what I'll be working on. Today's episode features a return visit from a former guest. Kira Hartley was my guest for episode 22 of the podcast in February of 2024. Kira is the author of the book Fabric Wars, Tales of the Hunt for Vintage Fabric, with Etsy's Dodd Oddity. Dodd Oddity is the name of Kira's Etsy store, and a few months ago she emailed me and said she had a new book coming out, which is called Fabric Wars and More. The insanity of online resale continues with Etsy's Dodd Oddity. I am excited for Kira. She tells me that there will be a third book in this series, but I wanted to have her back to talk about the second book and about some exciting things that are happening in her life. So without further ado, we'll jump right into the interview. So welcome back to the podcast, Kira Hartley, and it is great to have you on again.
Oh, I was so happy to get back on again too.
And you wrote a book called Fabric Wars, and now you have a new book out called Fabric Wars and More. We're going to talk about the new book, but for our listeners who maybe haven't had a chance to listen to the first interview, can you give us a real short recap about your first book? And then we'll jump in and talk about the second one.
Okay, so I have been in resale for fabric for I don't know 15 or 16 years. I buy typically estate fabric, and I have an Etsy shop that specializes in vintage fabric and salvage textiles. And I started to write stories on the pages of my listings talking about where the fabric came from, or maybe something ridiculous that an auctioneer had done, or fighting the competition. They were just all little silly snippets about my adventures. And I had a number of customers that continued to prompt me to write a book. And so I finally put them together in a book, and that was the first Fabric Wars. And because I'm still hustling and going to auctions, the stories continue. And so now there's Fabric Wars and More. And the goal is to have a trilogy. So Fabric Wars galore is in the making.
Wonderful. So we have something to look forward to.
Yes.
Did your second book change in format from the first one, or is it still stories from
It's still
different auctions?
stories.
Okay.
Yeah, and it picks up kind of where it left off. Not every auction is necessarily about fabric. Sometimes they advertise fabric and you get there and it's not what you expected. Sometimes they don't advertise fabric and you get there and it's like, holy cow. You know, I went to now this is going to be one for the third book, but there's an auction called I call it a bungee and a shoestring. And I went to this auction. It was a country estate, and they advertised that there were sewing machines and that there were some quilts. And so I have been speaking at quilt guilds. I've been taking my shop on the road and taking my book on the road. And I have learned that people who make quilts typically belong to quilt guilds. And people that belong to quilt guilds typically have more fabric than they know what to do with. And so I read her obituary and I found out that she was actually like president of her quilt guild. And I'm like, okay, there's fabric. I know there's fabric at this sale. Even though the auctioneer didn't say it, I know there's going to be fabric. And yeah, there was so much fabric. It was ridiculous. She had boxcars from like trains planted in her yard. And I went into one of them and there were just tote after tote after tote after tote of fabric that she had saved and stored over the years, and nobody else had gone in there to even look. And so I got all of it. I literally got all of it. I got them for $5 a tote, and it was my choice. And I just went in there and started pulling things out and stacking them up. And it was a rainy, muddy day. It was horrible. And there was so much that I stuffed it into garbage bags and I stuffed it into my car. There was no room to see. It was insane. Everything was muddy and wet and dirty. And so by default, I had also won this fabulous mid-century desk chair. It had like a green plastic molded frame and the metal legs, but there was no room for it, you know? And I'm like, how am I going to get this home? And so this woman there that was there, she was buying the doll stuff. She's like, oh, we can figure something out. I know we can figure something out. And she's probably in her 70s. And she ran around and she came back and she handed me one bungee and a handful of shoestrings. And she said, you can get that on your roof. I know you can. So, we had a roof rack. And I'm like, okay, but it's going to really scratch my car. So I started to think about some of the stuff I had to leave behind because I ran out of room. And so I'm like, okay, there's this fabulous feather bed that I bought from the upstairs. I'm going to go get that. So I put that on top of my car. I put the chair on top of the feather bed. We tied the legs with the shoestrings to the roof rack. We got it home like an hour away in the pouring rain with this chair strapped to my roof with shoestrings. So I really wanted to write to her or somehow message her. And I'm like, thank you. Your shoestrings saved the day. And now I got to keep the chair.
Oh,
But
what a great story.
so you just never know what you're going to find. So yes, it picks up from the first one, more auction stories. But there's also stories about people that have been in my journey and that I've met along the way. And, it's a diary in a lot of ways, but way more than just fabric.
So that story features someone who was very helpful
Yes.
to you, but I would imagine that that's not always the case.
Oh,
Sometimes you have to deal with the competition.
uh, yeah. So in the second book, there is a 6-part series that I called the black hole. And each second of the black hole represents one of the auctions. And the first auction was in the dead of winter. It was minus, I don't know, it was supposed to be -6 that day. And, I looked at the pictures of the, like I used Google Earth. Where is this place? Please tell me it is not an outside auction when it's going to be in the negative temperatures. And so it showed a building and I'm like, oh great, it's in like a storage facility or something. But these auctions advertise this lifetime collection of mid-century modern and depression era items. And so with that comes bark cloth. And for anybody who doesn't know what bark cloth is, it's a natural fiber. It's like a cotton and it's woven in nubby like the bark of a tree. Extremely popular for draperies in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. And you had these big, bold, elaborate floral patterns in the 30s. And then by the time you got to the 40s and 50s, they were getting very atomic. So you had atomic patterns. And I mean, they're just fabulous. And bark cloth is really, really desirable. So I knew there was going to be bark cloth, and it's really hard to find. So I went to this auction, and yes, it was in a storage facility, and it was stacked mile high with everything mid-century that you have never seen before, and doubles and triples and quadruples. And the auctioneer, I mean, and this is an auctioneer that I call Sir Grumples because he is famous for storming out of auctions in a flurry out of nowhere. And then somebody has to take over for him. He just gets aggravated and says, oh, throws his hands up in the air and storms off. So he decided that he didn't want people in that cramped space knocking things over. So he had the garage door open and a tent set up outside, like just like a, not even like 4-wall tent, like a little canopy thing to protect you from the sun, which is clearly not going to protect you from -6 degree temperatures. And so the lot of us that gathered there were like, oh my gosh, we thought it was an inside auction and nobody is dressed for it, you know? And so this poor woman is standing there in like workout leggings and tennis shoes and a sweat jacket and a baseball cap. Her ankles are showing, it's really, really cold. And my husband had said, just in case, pack a hat, gloves, a blanket, pack things just in case. It's an hour away. If something happens, you never know if you're going to break down. So I did. And I had a quilt in there. So I am bundled to the max. And I see this poor woman. She's standing there with her husband. He has a hat on his head and a hood. And she has nothing. And I'm like, really, dude? Give your wife your hat, something, anything. So I went up to her and I said, I have another blanket in the car. It's my dog's blanket, but it's clean. She's like, I don't care. I'll take it. So, she's wrapped up in my dog's blanket. But anyway, the competition at these sales was so incredibly brutal. And it didn't matter how many people were there. The first sale, most of the people went home. There was only about 20 of us left, but it didn't matter. I got so beat up on buying that bark cloth. And there was also linen. Like linen was really popular during those eras for drapery and upholstery too. I just got some fabulous pieces. Anyway, the next 5 sales were inside their facility. So it was good for the warmth, but bad because more people showed up. And there was one particular sale where this woman showed up, and I guess we were not very kind, but sometimes you get bored at auctions. But they had a lot of vintage Hawaiian fabric or shirts that day. I'm sorry, like vintage Hawaiian shirts and muumuus and dresses and bikini tops. And yes, there was also fabric. And so she had showed up for the Hawaiian clothing, and she was making her own piles from around the room and stacking them by the auctioneer, so that they could be sold first. And this particular chapter I called Short Bang Theory. She was kind of dressed like the 70s. She had very, very, very long, dark hair, straight hair, and bangs that were cut straight across her forehead, about halfway up, like how I cut my bangs when I was 5. So, I mean, so anyway, I know it's not kind, but it was the first thing that came to my mind. So anyway, she was so passionate about her stacks. And I had a friend there with me. And I was interested in the Hawaiian stuff too, because of course I sell on eBay as well. And so we're kind of watching her from afar. And as soon as she walked away from her stacks, we walked over and made our own stacks from her stacks. Because, they sell it by the stack. So she had and so she huffs on back over and she says, you can't do that. You're not allowed to rearrange and make your own stacks. And we're like, well, you kind of did. And so by the time the auction started, there were 3 or 4 people that had gotten in on this rearranging the stack thing. And it was torture. It was not nice, but in the end, I did get a bunch of it. She got a bunch of it. We all got some anyway. We were playful.
I'm sure that everyone who attends those auctions regularly is used to that kind of behavior.
Well, we all know each other. And, so we were all regulars and she was not. She was brand new. And the whispers among everybody was that she was there with her husband and they were prop people. They owned these warehouses and provided props for movie sets and things like that. So she was an outsider. She just kind of got picked on for that reason alone, I think.
So there were, you said, a total of 6 auctions?
Yeah, there were 6 auctions before that estate was liquidated. And I spent more in 3 months than I typically spend in a year. There was so much stuff in my house and in my garage. You would open up my garage door and you couldn't even walk in. And I have this massive 2-car garage. Filled to the gills. And it has been over a year and I am still selling stuff from that estate. I am still trying to dig my way through it. But the stress of having it on my kitchen table and on the bench where you put your shoes on and lining the hallway to get to the TV room. I mean, it just was everywhere. There was this constant sorting going on, and all of the bark cloth and all of the linen and all of the textiles that I got, which flew off my shelves. But I had to process it, and it was all very, very musty. And so I had to clean it. And, luckily I've developed cleaning methods over the years for cleaning textiles. And I even did a video about how to clean old bark cloth. And somebody messaged me and she says, you saved my bark cloth. Thank you for that video. So that made me happy. That little Grammy Whammy odor deodorizer that I invented years ago saved the day with all that fabric. It really did.
When I visit my daughter in Seattle, I always stay at the same Airbnb, and it's decorated in original mid-century modern furniture.
Oh,
It's
it's so
absolutely
nice.
wonderful. And so I'm
Yeah.
imagining the bark cloth, the curtains and everything in there and the upholstery, because
Mm.
that's how it's decorated and it's all original. It's absolutely gorgeous. So I'm curious, are you starting to see the vintage change as you go to these auctions? So I would imagine maybe 20 or 30 years ago, we were seeing more Depression era textiles, and now we're starting to see more mid-century modern textiles. Is that what you're seeing as you go to these auctions?
There is a shift in it naturally as the generations get older. And I mean, like when the majority of the fabric that I find for my shop is 1980s, because the people that are reaching the end of their lives and this fabric is getting passed on, that's when they were really active in quilting. So 80s is a huge generation right now. My favorite eras for fabric are the 30s through the 70s. I love the patterns. I love the prints. And I can go on and on and on about the quality of fabric then versus now. So when I find anything that is mid-century or Depression era or older, it's an adrenaline rush. I because I don't find it very often. So I do get carried away. And every time I would go to one of those black hole auctions and I would write this hefty 4-digit check, and I would be like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? And then there would only be a week to recap in between the two auctions. And so the first 3 days, I'm talking myself out of going to the next one. It's like, you can't go. You can't go. You've spent so much money. There's no more room in your house. You're up to your eyeballs in cleaning things. You can't go. And then the last 3 days, you'd be like, well, you have to go. You're never going to see these things again. And so, of course, the auctioneer, and this is Sir Grumples, and while he's grumpy, yes, but he also walks around bragging to everybody, you're never going to see this stuff again. So he's just encouraging it. And we're like, yeah, we know. So every week the competition is getting together and kind of licking their wounds from the last one. And we're all like, yeah, it's all right. I'm going to let you have some more things this week. And then you get to the end of the sale and you've spent more than the first one. And you're just like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? It's like, I have to stop. It was bad.
But you're right. The worst thing I think that I could imagine happening is all that fabric ending up in a landfill.
Exactly. And there was one particular sale, one of them that I went to, and I tell myself all the time, don't buy big things. Don't buy big things. Do not buy things that are hard to ship. And I have a shipping guy and I adore him and I can take things to him and he will box the most ridiculous things and he'll charge me like $20 to make the box and pack it. You can't go wrong. So I walked into this one sale and there is this German fiberglass mannequin and she's posing on her. She lays on her side, like really I'm not even going to come up with the word, provocatively. There you go. And she has glass eyes. And I mean, she's just fabulous. And, she's sitting in this box, her torso's hanging out, her legs are hanging out. And one of the auctioneer helpers, the people that bring things to the auctioneer to sell, I call them the henchmen. Okay. So the henchmen of Sir Grumples have very strong personalities. They're hysterical. And he has taken a Post-it note and put one on either side of her naked chest. And one says don't, and the other one says peek. And so, I mean, just ridiculous things that go on these auctions. So of course I'm like, well, I have to have it. And I don't buy ridiculous things. And this massive mannequin that you can't possibly box. And I bought it. I bought the dang thing. I spent $190 on her. And a few minutes later, I spent $270 on a very small box of linen and fabric from the mid-century because somebody wouldn't quit bidding. And within the first 10 minutes, there were other things, but I spent like over $500 in the auction. It just started. It's like, okay, I'm not off to a good start. But I'll break the suspense. I did sell the mannequin. It took me about 6 months to sell her. And she went to a guy in Pennsylvania who had a friend in New York that did window displays. So she was this vintage German mannequin, was on her way to New York in a roundabout way, but he was giving her as this gift. And he paid $850 for her. And I took her to my shipping guy and I figured he was going to lock the door when he saw me walking across the parking lot with this box of mannequin parts. And no, he packaged her up. I really think, again, he charged me like $20 to make the box. And yeah, I didn't have to do anything. So, go on, bye-bye, thank you. But yeah, for 6 months, I'm like looking at that mannequin every day going, why did I buy that? Why did I buy that?
What's your typical turnaround time? Or do you not have a typical turnaround time?
As far as from when I buy it to when I sell it?
Yeah.
It really varies. The bark cloth and the linen was disappearing almost as fast as I could list it. I still have some random pieces left in both of my shops. I think I've gotten it all listed by now, a year later, but the processing of it really takes a while. It takes a while to even just get it listed. And if it's something that's really hot, it'll sell quickly. But like the mannequin, it took 6 months. So the trick with eBay and Etsy is that you have to have a constant revolving inventory. So something is always selling, but that also means that you have to have some place to store the inventory. So I am in the middle of creating a space out in my garage. I've been building shelving out there and for my fabric. And I mean, there must be 50 totes of fabric out there. And I probably have at least that much in my house. So that's something. It's just, yeah, you just don't know. There was a sale that I went to recently the people that make stained glass lampshades, they use a mold to make those lampshades. And so I had found this auction because I always look at my keywords for fabric or material, things like that. And it popped up because they claimed there was material there. Okay, there wasn't any, but that's what landed me on that auction. But this guy was a guy that made stained glass lampshades, and he was quite good at it, and he had a following and had made quite a bit of money. And so he had passed, and now it was time to sell it. So they mentioned having these lampshade molds. And I don't know what it is, but ever since I started doing this, certain things just set off a radar. And as soon as I saw lampshade molds, I've never seen them, I've never sold them, but something in my brain said those are worth money. And so I did my research on them, and I went to the sale, and these were made, excuse me, by a company called Odyssey, and you can't get them anymore. And it used to be that all the stained glass lamp places sold the molds, and they would sell the patterns separately. And these are gigantic molds. I mean, some of them are only 16 inches around, but some of them are 24 inches around. And then you figure the box has to be as tall. This is a gigantic box. So I found out that these molds were selling years later, no matter the fact that they were used and had dried glue on them, for the same price as what they sold brand new. So these gigantic molds were worth $500 to $600 a piece. And this guy's shop was full of them. And so, the first couple ones that I got were sat up on a tall shelf in a garage, and nobody bid on them. I paid $2 a piece for them. And then I went into his shop, and there were two other people that were bidding against me, but not very enthusiastically. And I paid anywhere from like $25 to $40 a piece for them. So I ended up with, I think, 23 molds, and I had spent less than $600, and I had cleaned them, photographed them, listed them, and sold every last one of them in 6 days for $6,000 total. Those are the things that I would love to find every single day,
Right.
But the ironic thing was they said they had fabric and there was none, but yet I got to go anyway. So, the book is always going a different direction. Well, I thought there was going to be fabric, but this is what I found instead. So, happy ending.
And it pays to do your research, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not a big fan of doing research, but when I land on something that's exciting, you don't sleep a lot the night before because it's like, oh, does anybody else know? you know.
I tell my husband sometimes I'll walk into a thrift store
Yes.
and the tips of my fingers will start to tingle. And I just get this sense that there's something special there. And I have found several vintage sewing machines that way.
Oh, nice.
And sometimes you have to go search for them, but just the fact, I mean, it gives me goosebumps. I probably shouldn't talk about it, but
But I get the same way. And I'm grounded right now. Okay. I'm not finished organizing my garage. I have a tremendous amount of things left to list and sell, but that's not the fun part. The fun part is going to the auction and going up against people and laughing at the auctioneers. So yeah, I'm grounded right now, and it's really a bummer because I want to go to a sale really, really bad.
are
But
you finding that there are more sales now, fewer sales now? Do you have to go further afield?
um summertime there are always more sales. Um and the ironic thing is that when summer hits, I'm so busy. One, like I said, I constantly have a tremendous amount of stuff that needs to be listed, but it's summertime, and I have gardens that I tend, and we have grandkids that come for camp, and we go on vacations to see family. So I would love to go to more summer sales, but it never seems to work out that way. I seem to go mostly in the fall and the winter. It shuts down the outside sales for about 3 months, and then you're left with consignment sales inside auction houses, which I have a love-hate relationship with. Um, but the thing that is happening right now that I don't care for a whole lot is that a lot of auctioneers are going to the online format. And so it's getting harder and harder to find in-person auctions. And that is where you typically find the best things, or the ones that belong to an estate. Somebody has passed and it's generational, and maybe they lived in that farmhouse, their parents lived there, and their grandparents lived there, and the attic is full of treasures, and now it's time to sell it all. That's the kind of auction to go to versus going to an auction house where a collector has decided that they need to sell off a bunch of their collectibles because they want to buy more. And so then you draw out all the people that collect those things. And it's just not what I'm looking for. I'm looking to be the first person to get that thing that's been hidden in the attic.
Sure.
Yeah. So I hope it never gets to the point where everything's online. I understand that it's easier for the auctioneer. There's less overhead. They don't have to go to the property, and they can list it for 2 weeks at a time and give people the opportunity to really consider what they have put out there. And everybody has a chance to look it up. And it's not as fun as the heat of the moment thing where in 60 seconds it's gone and you're either going to be happy you bought it or you're going to be regretful that you didn't bid more, but it's over. I think that the newer auctioneers are doing this because they're more technology inclined. And I think that when the old timer auctioneers die out and retire, I think that we're going to see a shift. So that's going to be sad for me. It's going to change the dynamics of everything I do.
Yeah. I have a love-hate relationship with technology.
Yes, me too. Me too. It's a necessary evil. Yeah.
So talk about some of the other things, as if you're not busy enough. Talk about some of the other things you're doing. Speaking to guilds is new for you, I think.
It is. After I published the first book, I'm an indie author. I published it myself. And so all of the marketing was on me, it's on my shoulders. And so, okay, what am I going to do with it? And all of my customers that had told me to write the book, I was like, okay, well, I wrote the book. So, are you going to buy it? Hello. So I started printing out messages, little notes to put in all of my packages, just basically saying, hey, I finally wrote the book, check it out, whatever. And I started slipping those in all my packages. You found me because you were sick over Christmas looking for something to read, and it popped up, on your Kindle. So that was very random. But one of the things that happened to me with those notes was that, unbeknownst to me, I had sold a $3 piece of scrap fabric to a Los Angeles TV producer. And so she wrote me a message and said, I'm so-and-so, and I'm a reality TV producer. How do you feel about being on TV, or something along those lines? And I was like, what? How did that happen? So, I have this relationship with her now. There's no big reality show out there yet. I'm kind of like this 50-something chic American picker woman in flowered pants. I don't know where she's going with it, but anyway. So the other thing that I started to do was I was like, okay, well, who would be most interested in what I do? And I'm like, well, okay, well, I sell fabric, people who quilt. So I started to write to quilting guilds. Hey, I'm not too far away from you. I've written this book. I sell fabric. Would you like to have me as your guest speaker? And so I booked, I don't know, over a dozen over the course of the next year. And they don't have speakers every month. They only meet once a month, and it's not always a speaker that they have. So a lot of times I'd have to wait 6, 7, 8 months. I think one of them I waited a year before it was my turn. But I learned a lot, about what people are looking for and what they want. And it's definitely where I sold the most books, for sure. I would read a chapter and I'd look out in the audience. And if I saw people nodding, I'm like, okay, I'm on the right path. This is a good chapter. So they were relating to me. But that's when I learned that people that go to quilting guilds generally don't want to buy any more fabric because they have lots,
Yes.
And the first one that I showed up to, and I have scraps like crazy, and I try not to throw anything away. And so in my shop, I sell bags, 1-pound bags of scraps. And so I'm like, well, quilters like scraps. I'm going to take them to the quilting guild. So I bring 2 giant straw laundry baskets full of scraps. And I brought a scale in Ziploc bags. And I'm like, big sign out there said, scraps by the ounce, X amount of dollars by the ounce. And I get it all set up. And then I look, and over on the side of the room is a long table with all these scraps that everybody has donated, with a big sign that says free. I'm like, okay.
Oh, well.
So, oh, well. So that was the last time I brought scraps too, but it became a funny thing to tell when I was talking at future quilt fields. Okay, well, this is what I did the first time. But yeah, they're like, yeah, we don't need scraps. I'm like, yeah, I know. I figured that out.
Our estates are going to be estate sales someday because we have so much fabric.
Oh my gosh. I keep telling my kids, I tell my husband all the time because we also have the grandkid thing going on and we have the farm and we collect things for camp. Camp starts in 3 days for 2025. So the 8 kids are going to be coming. I'm not ready. But we've got this bus that I painted Scooby-Doo like that we putter around for camp. And we have a pond and it has a pontoon boat with a slide on it. And we just bought 4 kayaks for this year. It's like every year we're adding to it. And I looked at my husband and I said, you know what? One day they're going to have an auction at our house and everybody's going to be saying the same thing. Man, they have stuff. And we do. We have stuff in every corner.
It is fun. It is fun.
It's fun.
And you're making memories.
Yes.
And there are memories associated with these fabrics. I look at some of the
Yes.
fabrics that I've bought and I can remember where I was, why I bought it, what was
Mhm.
going on in my life at the time.
And I've learned that people are really interested in the life of the fabric that they're buying. I had one woman that was buying fabric in my store and she was determined to make a quilt just from all of the fabrics that I had from the different estates, from the different eras, and she was collecting all of the stories and back history behind them and she was going to chronicle this quilt that she was making. And how fun is that to be a part of that, to be able to bring all of these very different people and stories and generations and to put it all together.
Besides book number 3 and a possible reality TV show,
I know, right?
do you have anything else in the works?
Okay, so you're going to love this because this is completely random, but that's my life. I mean, I'm so scattered, it's not even funny. I just published a children's book. The artwork on the cover of my 2 Fabric Wars books was done by my best friend. And she came into art very late in life. And she suffered a lot of loss and a lot of sadness. And she just discovered painting and it really kind of saved her in a lot of ways. So when I wrote the first book, she's like, I really want to paint your cover. I said, of course. And so then, of course, she painted the second cover. And then she said to me, I really want to illustrate a children's book. And my mother has been telling me for years that I need to write the stories of camp because we've been having camp here on the farm. I think this is our 12th year, and there's some fabulous stories. There really are. So what we decided to do was we started a children's book series and it's told by the bus. And this elaborately painted crazy bus that we drive around in. And I mean, we go out in this bus and people stop and take pictures and take videos and they come and talk to us. The kids love it. It has an ooga horn and everything. So you know so it's not, I mean, it's based on true stories, but it's not verbatim. Yes, there are 8 kids that are on the bus. But the first book is how we found the bus. He was on a very lonely, tiny country car lot, all dirty and dusty and hoping for a new home. It was an old retired church bus and, peeling letters and just, not very appealing. And so it's just and I keep going back to his. Arlo is the bus. The bus's name is Arlo. Arlo's not a boy. Arlo's not a girl. Arlo is just a bus, period. And so, I don't know why I keep saying his, it just wants to pop out of my mouth, but Arlo is a bus. So Arlo goes through this transformation, throughout this book. And it's all about the emotions that Arlo is going through as the bus gets fixed and gets painted and gets the crazy turquoise fur hanging on the ceiling and saying, wow, do I look silly? And at the very end of the book, the lesson that we hope the child walks away with is that they feel loved. And so every book is going to have a message. And the first book is I am loved. And so we already have the theme for the second book, but we literally just published this, I think, 3 days ago.
And what's the title?
This is called, the first one is Arlo the Camp Bus. And right now you can get it on ebook or paperback on Amazon. We are working towards getting a hardcover done on Ingram Spark. But we have our first library tour is August 23rd, and we have an author/illustrator breakfast with Arlo in the morning. And then and I'm so proud of myself, I have an actual paid ticket author luncheon for my second book in that afternoon. I want to take the bus with us. I want to take the bus to library tours, and maybe we can even do readings in the bus or something. I don't know. My brain is exploding. It's here, there, it's everywhere. And
if people want to find you, maybe I'll put all the links in the show notes, but if you just want to mention you have an Etsy shop, and I think
yes,
your books are available.
They're on Amazon. I mean, you really can go into punch it in my book, Fabric Wars, and More. You can literally buy it anywhere. The home base is on Amazon. If you buy it on Etsy, though, like as a gift or for yourself, I can sign it. So that's the advantage of Etsy. I don't have Arlo on Etsy yet. Arlo's just on Amazon right now. But it's coming. I have to order author copies to be able to do that. So yes, my shop's name is Dodd Oddity, DODODDITY, and that is on Etsy. And you can message me there. I have an Instagram page with the same name. I throw up a lot of videos there about things that I'm buying, or like I said, cleaning bark cloth. I've done some tips on there about identifying vintage fabric and doing burn testing. I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff. So you can find me there too. I have an author page on Facebook too.
We've been talking for a while. I hate to wrap this up because I
know
know
you're good. I know
so many more stories.
There are tons.
But we can always have you back for book 3.
Okay. Okay. Well, in the meantime, there's 54 stories collectively between the 2 books. So there's lots to keep people busy until then.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you again for having me. I love coming back.
I've got Fabric Wars and More queued up on my Kindle to read. And even if you don't shop at estate sales or look for vintage fabric, you're probably going to find the stories very entertaining. And if you do frequent those places, I'm sure that you will be able to relate to some of the experiences that Kira had. So check out her books. I am about to go head to my sewing room to do some work. I just want to say, as always, that I appreciate feedback. I love to read the reviews on Apple Podcasts. The emails that I get are the highlight of my day, and I do try to respond to every one of them. If you have questions or comments, feel free to email me at janet@janetzabo.com or leave a comment on the show notes page. Use the fan mail feature, go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I have lots of ways for you to let me know what you're thinking about the podcast and what you would like to hear about. The show notes can be found on the podcast website at www.thestraightstitchpodcast.com. My website is www.janetzabo.com, and there are links to my Big Sky Knitting Designs website as well as my blog. If you want to check out what I'm working on, you can either look at the Instagram posts under the Straight Stitch Podcast, or you can check out my blog. And until our next episode, I hope that you have a great week and that you get to go sew something.